Imagine a girl, 12 years old, standing in the doorway of a mud and thatch hut 10,000 years ago. She is holding a baby. The baby is hers. And if you could travel back and stand in front of her, the most disturbing part wouldn't be her age. It would be her face. Because she wouldn't look traumatized. She would look at you like you were the strange one. Like you were the one who didn't understand how the world works. And here's the unsettling part. In her world, she was right. You are the anomaly. The fact that you reached 12, 16, 20 without being handed a child of your own to keep alive is not the natural state of humanity. It is one of the rarest, newest, most fragile conditions our species has ever known. For almost all of human existence, childhood as you know it simply did not exist. And the reason why is darker and more calculated than almost anyone realizes. This is the story of why ancient humans had children so young. And I need to warn you, it is not the story you think. It's not a tale of ignorant people who didn't know better, or a world so short everyone rushed to cram life in before dying. Those explanations are comforting because they let us feel superior. The real answer strips that comfort away. Because early childbearing was not a mistake. It was a solution. A cold, ruthless, breathtakingly effective solution to a problem so terrifying, our ancestors solved it with the only currency they had, their own children's bodies. Let's kill the biggest myth first. You've heard it 100 times. In ancient times, people only lived to about 30, so obviously they had kids young because they were halfway to the grave as teenagers. It sounds logical, and it's almost completely wrong. Life expectancy really was low, often in the 20s or 30s, but that average is a statistical illusion. It's being dragged down violently by dead children. In many ancient populations, between a third and half of all children died before the age of 5. Think about what that does to an average. If one child dies at 2 and their sibling lives to 70, the average lifespan is 36, a number that describes neither of them. It's a ghost number, haunted by all the tiny graves that pulled it down. Here's the truth the myth hides. If you survived childhood and reached 15, your odds changed dramatically. You could reasonably expect to live into your 50s, 60s, even 70s. Grandparents weren't mythical. They were common and treasured. So the old logic collapses. It wasn't that everyone was dying at 30 and reproducing in a panic, which makes the real question sharper and far more uncomfortable. If they weren't all about to die, then why? Why hand a child to a child? To answer that, we start with a secret the body itself was keeping. Today, in wealthy nations, the average girl has her first period around 12 or 13. And here's what breaks people's assumptions. That number has been falling for over a century, not rising. Go back to the 1800s in Europe, and it was closer to 15 or 16. In many cases, ancient bodies matured later than modern ones. Why? Because your body is not a passive machine. It's a relentless accountant, constantly tracking fat stores and calories, measuring whether there's enough energy to survive the staggering cost of pregnancy and breastfeeding. When food is scarce, the body does something eerie. It hits pause. It delays puberty as biological insurance, refusing to start a process it might not finish. Researchers call this critical fat mass. So in ancient societies racked by famine, puberty often didn't arrive at 12. It arrived at 15, 16, or later. But here's the twist. In the right conditions, the schedule flipped. Among wealthier, better-fed populations, puberty came early, and marriage followed like a shadow. In ancient Rome, the law set the minimum age of marriage at 12 for girls. 12, written into law. In practice, many Roman brides, especially elites, married in their later teens. But sit with the fact that 12 was even considered legitimate. That tells you how alien their idea of childhood was. There was no adolescence, no protected decade of figuring yourself out. You were a small child who needed care. And then, the moment your body flickered the signal, you were an adult in training. There was no cushion in between. Now we reach the engine underneath it all. A survival equation written in life and death. Picture a small band of foragers 10,000 years ago. Your community is under siege, constantly. From disease with no cure.
From famine with no warning. From predators, violence, and childbirth itself, one of the leading killers of women for nearly all of human history. In this world, every woman able to bear a child is, coldly, a precious and limited resource on which the survival of the whole group depends. Anthropologists have a chilling term for this: high extrinsic mortality. Death coming not from old age, but from the outside, striking at any age, without mercy. And here's where it clicks into horrifying focus. When mortality is that high, evolution responds with brutal mathematical logic. Biologists call call it life history theory, the trade-offs every living thing makes between growing, surviving, and reproducing. In a safe world, waiting to reproduce makes sense. You'll likely survive to do it later. But in a world drowning in death, waiting is a bet you lose. Waiting means you might die childless. Waiting means your family line ends. So the pressure bends everything toward one answer. Start early. Have more. Start now. Because there may be no later. And this isn't abstract theory. It's written in bone. When archaeologists study ancient burials, they find young mothers, shockingly young by our standards, alongside the physical scars of what early childbearing did to bodies still growing. The human female pelvis keeps developing into the late teens. Some adolescent skeletons show stress consistent with childbirth before that was complete. I won't dress this up. Early pregnancy in still growing bodies was dangerous. Higher rates of obstructed labor, of maternal death, of infant death. It was not some gentle natural arrangement. It often killed. And the fact that it happened anyway, across thousands of cultures and years, tells you how monstrous the pressure behind it truly was. But there's a strange, almost beautiful curveball here. The grandmother hypothesis. Human women are bizarre among mammals. They go through menopause and then keep living for decades. Almost no other creature does this. In most species, once an animal can't reproduce, it doesn't live much longer. So why do human grandmothers stay? The answer is haunting. Older women who could no longer bear children became providers, protectors, keepers of knowledge. They helped raise and feed their grandchildren, freeing their daughters to have more children sooner, because there was now a safety net of experienced hands. This reframes that girl in the doorway completely. She was almost certainly not alone. She was wrapped inside a web of older women, grandmothers, aunts, seasoned mothers, all sharing the crushing weight of keeping a child alive. Anthropologists call it alloparenting. It's the difference between a terrified child left alone with a newborn and a young girl held up by every experienced woman she'd ever known. Still brutal, but no longer impossible. There's one more twist. Ancient humans were never one people. Among some hunter-gatherers studied today, like the Hadza of Tanzania, first births actually came later, often around 18 or 19, because lean diets and hard physical lives delayed fertility. But then came agriculture. And here's the dark irony. We think of farming as humanity's triumphant leap forward. In some ways, it was a catastrophe for the young. It created surpluses that pushed puberty earlier, but it also created property, inheritance, land, alliances, wealth that needed heirs. Suddenly, a young woman's marriage was about securing land and producing heirs as fast as possible. Especially among elites, marriage ages plunged younger, not out of survival now, but out of strategy and power. The same revolution that built our world also weaponized childhood. So when someone asks why ancient humans had kids so young, the honest answer is that it depends. But underneath all the variation runs one thread that never breaks, and it's the most disturbing truth of all. The idea of a long, safe, protected adolescence is astonishingly new. For nearly all of human history, the gap between able to have children and expected to have children was razor thin or didn't exist at all. The moment your body signaled readiness, society was built to move you toward marriage and children fast. Because a world without antibiotics, without doctors, without safe childbirth, without guaranteed food, could not afford the luxury of waiting, the luxury you were born into. And this is where it turns back on you. When we look at 12-year-old brides, we feel deep, justified unease, sometimes horror. And that reaction is correct. But this was not a world of villains. It was a species running a merciless cost-benefit calculation under conditions of death and scarcity we can barely imagine, where the math kept pointing to the same brutal answer, because it was one of the only ways to keep a people from vanishing entirely. And now the thought that should stay with you. Every person alive today, including you, is the final link in an unbroken chain of ancestors who survived and reproduced under exactly these conditions. Somewhere in your own bloodline, there was almost certainly a young mother, very possibly a teenager, who took a terrifying risk simply by giving birth and faced odds that killed countless women in her exact position. And she lived long enough for the next link to form, all the way down until it reached you. You are proof that she won. What's almost miraculous miraculous is how fast it changed once it could. As food became reliable, as vaccines and clean water made child death collapse, as economies stopped needing every child as working hands, the age of marriage climbed steadily across the world. The extended adolescence we treat as normal, the years of school, of growing up slowly, is not a human birthright. It's a byproduct of abundance and safety no ancestor of yours ever knew. So the fact that today's 12-year-olds worry about a math test instead of surviving childbirth is not just a pleasant cultural shift. It is one of the great, quiet triumphs of the human story. So the next time you hear that ancient people had kids at 12 because they didn't know better, you'll understand the truth is stranger and more haunting than that. It was never ignorance. It was survival, running its cold calculations in the background of an entire species, generation after generation, until finally, only a heartbeat ago in the scale of time, we found a way to give childhood back the years it had always deserved.